Taeho had seen many strange things in his long career as a Galactic Council ambassador. He had walked on planets made entirely of glass. He had watched stars die and new ones take their place. He had spoken to species so old that they remembered the birth of the galaxy itself. But nothing in all his years of service had prepared him for the signal that came from the Sol system on a quiet Tuesday morning. He was sitting in his office aboard the council station, drinking a warm cup of herbal water, when the alert hit his screen. It was not a normal alert. Normal alerts came in blue. This one was red, deep red, the kind of red that made his stomach tighten and his fingers go cold. The message was short. It read, "Unknown energy signature detected. Origin, Sol 3 lunar orbit. Classification, impossible." Taeho set down his cup. He read the message again. Then he read it a third time. The word impossible was not something the Galactic Sensor Network used lightly. The system had been built by the Varan, one of the oldest and most advanced species in the known galaxy. Their sensors could detect a single drop of water falling on a planet 3 star systems away. When the Varan system said something was impossible, it meant that whatever it had found should not exist according to any known law of physics. He stood up from his chair and walked quickly down the long silver hallway toward the communication center. Other officers passed him, some nodding, some too busy to notice. The station was always busy. The Galactic Council managed over 400 species spread across 9 galactic arms. There was always a border dispute or a trade agreement or a new species making first contact. But today none of that mattered. When Taeho reached the communication center, Grand Admiral Su-bin was already there. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for never raising her voice, even in the middle of a battle. She stood in front of the main display screen with her arms crossed. On the screen was a 3-dimensional map of the Sol system. A small blue dot marked Earth, and next to Earth's moon there was a blinking red circle. "When did this appear?" Taeho asked. 47 minutes ago, Su-bin said without turning around. "The signature is massive, bigger than anything we have seen from a Class 7 civilization." Taeho frowned. Earth was classified as a Class 7 civilization. That meant they were new, young. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 8 years ago, and even that had been a crude, ugly version of it. Their ships were small and slow compared to Council vessels. They traded basic minerals and cultural data in exchange for simple technology. They were not a threat. They were not even close to being a threat. Or at least, that was what everyone had believed until 47 minutes ago. "Send me there," Taeho said. Su-bin finally turned to look at him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were not. "You want to go personally? If the sensors are wrong, we need to know. If they are right, we need to know even more." Su-bin studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Take the fast courier. I want a full report within 12 hours. Taeho left the station within the hour. The fast courier was a small ship, built for speed and nothing else. It jumped through fold space in a matter of seconds, crossing the distance between the Council station and the Sol system in less time than it took to finish a meal. When the ship dropped out of fold space near Earth's moon, Taeho leaned forward in his seat and looked through the viewport. What he saw made him stop breathing. A human ship, but it was not like any human ship he had ever seen. It was enormous, easily 3 kilometers long from nose to tail. Its hull was dark, almost black, with sharp angles and smooth curves that seemed to flow into each other like water over stone. Along its sides, pale blue lines of energy pulsed slowly, like the heartbeat of some sleeping giant. The energy readings on his console went wild the moment his sensors touched it. Power output, shield density, weapons capacity, every single number was far beyond what a Class 7 species should be capable of producing. Taeho sat in silence for a long time. He just stared at the ship. His mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing, but it kept failing. This was not a small jump forward. This was not a species slowly climbing the ladder of technology the way every other species had done for millions of years. This was something else entirely. The humans had skipped 100 rungs in a single step. He opened a communication channel. "This is Ambassador Taeho of the Galactic Council. I am requesting contact with the commanding officer of the vessel in lunar orbit." There was a pause. Then a voice came through. It was calm and steady. A male voice. Yun. "This is Captain Do Yun of the Earth vessel Baekdu. Welcome, Ambassador. We have been expecting someone from the Council." Taeho's fingers tightened on the armrest of his chair. They had been expecting him. That meant they knew the Council would detect the ship. They had not tried to hide it. They had wanted to be found. "Captain Do Yun," Taeho said carefully, "I need to ask you a question, and I need an honest answer." "Go ahead." "How long did it take your people to build this ship?" There was another pause. Then Do Yun answered, and the words hit Taeho like a punch to the chest. 18 months. Taeho closed his eyes. 18 months. The Varan had taken 200 years to build their first warship of this class. The Drellin had taken 300. Even the fastest species in Council history, the Fenari, had needed 40 years. And the humans had done it in 18 months. He opened his eyes and looked at the Baekdu one more time. The blue energy lines along its hull pulsed again, slow and steady. The ship looked like it was breathing, like it was alive. Taeho opened a secure channel back to the Council station. His voice was quiet when he spoke, but every word carried the weight of something enormous and terrifying. "Grand Admiral Subin, I have confirmed the signal. The humans have built a warship. It is beyond anything in our records. I recommend an emergency session of the full Council." Immediately. He paused, then added one more thing. "And Subin, tell the Council to be afraid." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had not even officially started, and already the room was in chaos. The Great Hall was the largest meeting space on the Council station. It was shaped like a half-circle, with rows of seats rising up from the central stage like the inside of a giant bowl. Normally, it held delegates from over 400 species, all seated in their assigned places, all following the strict rules of order that had governed Council meetings for thousands of years. But today, nobody was sitting. Nobody was following rules. Everyone was talking at once, and the sound of it filled the hall like a storm. Taeho stood near the back of the stage, watching. He had delivered his report 2 hours ago. He had kept it short and factual. He had described the ship, its size, its energy output, and the timeline of its construction. He had not added his own feelings or opinions. The facts were terrifying enough on their own. Grand Admiral Subin stood at the center of the stage, waiting for the noise to die down. She had called this session. She had read the report before anyone else, and unlike the rest of the room, she was perfectly still. Her hands were folded behind her back. Her face showed nothing. Finally, she raised one hand. The hall went quiet. Not because of any rule or tradition, but because when Subin raised her hand, people listened. She had that kind of presence. "The report is confirmed," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it reached every corner of the room. "The humans have constructed a warship in lunar orbit. It is 3 kilometers in length. Its power output exceeds anything in our current database, and they built it in 18 months. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then the hall exploded again. A delegate from the Varan stood up. He was old, even by Varan standards, with pale skin and thin fingers that trembled slightly as he pointed at the stage. "This is not possible," he said. We gave them basic propulsion technology only 8 years ago. Basic. They should not even be able to build a proper cargo hauler yet, let alone a warship of that size. And yet they have, Subin said simply. Another delegate stood. This one was from the Fenari, a species known for their speed in both thought and action. How did they do it? Did they steal technology? Did someone sell them classified designs? Our intelligence division has found no evidence of theft or illegal trade, Subin answered. As far as we can determine, the humans designed and built the ship entirely on their own. The Fenari delegate sat down slowly, as if his legs had gone weak. Tejo watched all of this from his place near the back. He could see the fear moving through the room like a wave. It was in the way delegates whispered to each other. It was in the way they kept glancing at the image of the Baekdu that hung in the air above the stage, rotating slowly. The ship looked even more frightening as a hologram, its dark hull and glowing blue lines casting strange shadows across the faces of the council members. A delegate from a smaller species, the Murani, raised her hand. She was young and had only been on the council for a few years. Her voice was steady, though. Grand Admiral, what are their intentions? Have they made any threats? Subin looked at Taho. He stepped forward. No, Taho said. Captain Doyun, the commanding officer of the vessel, was polite and cooperative during our brief communication. He did not make any threats. He did not demand anything. He simply confirmed the existence of the ship and answered my questions. That is almost worse, the Varan delegate muttered. Taho understood what the old delegate meant. A species that built something like the Baekdu and then threatened people with it was dangerous but predictable. A species that built something like the Baekdu and then just sat there, calm and quiet, waiting to see what would happen, that was something far more unsettling. Subin spoke again. I have called this session not to create panic, but to discuss our response. We have several options. The first is diplomacy. We send a formal delegation to Earth, open talks, and try to understand what they have built and why. And the second option? The Fenari delegate asked. Subin paused, just for a moment, just long enough for everyone in the room to feel the weight of what she was about to say. The second option is force. We assemble a fleet, go to Earth, and demand that the ship be surrendered or destroyed. The room went very quiet. Tejo felt something cold settle in his chest. He had known this was coming. He had known it from the moment he first saw the Baekdu hanging in the darkness near Earth's moon. The council was old, it was powerful, and it did not like surprises. When something new appeared that it could not understand or control, its first instinct was always the same: contain it. The Murani delegate spoke again. Grand Admiral, with respect, we do not even know if our fleet could match that ship. Ambassador Tejo's report says its shield density alone is beyond anything we have on record. That is correct, Subin said, which is why I am not recommending force as our first action. But I need the Council to understand that it must remain on the table. If the humans refuse to cooperate, we need to be prepared. The debate went on for hours. Delegates argued back and forth. Some wanted peace, some wanted war. Some wanted to pretend the whole thing was not happening and hope it went away. But underneath all the words and all the arguments, there was one feeling that united every single person in the room: fear. They were afraid because the rules had been broken. For millions of years, the galaxy had followed a pattern. Young species started small. They built simple ships. They made simple tools. They learned slowly, guided by older species who had walked the same path before them. It was a system. It was safe. It was predictable. The humans had shattered that pattern like glass. At the end of the session, Subin made her decision. We will send a fleet to Earth's orbit, she said. Not to attack. Not yet. But to show strength and to deliver a formal demand. The humans will be asked to explain the Baekdu, to open it for inspection, and to agree to limits on their shipbuilding capabilities. Taeho closed his eyes. He knew how humans would react to a fleet showing up at their doorstep with demands. He had read about their wars, their revolutions, their stubborn refusal to bend when pushed. Sending a fleet was not going to solve the problem. It was going to make it worse. But he said nothing. He was an ambassador, not a Grand Admiral. The decision was not his to make. As the delegates filed out of the Great Hall, Taeho stayed behind. He looked up at the hologram of the Baekdu, still rotating slowly above the empty stage. The blue lines along its hull pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. He wondered what Captain Do-yoon was doing right now. He wondered if the young captain was afraid, or if he was sitting calmly on his bridge, waiting, the same way he had been waiting when Taeho first contacted him. He wondered if the humans knew what was coming, and deep down, in a place he would never admit to anyone, he wondered if the council was making the biggest mistake in its very long history. Ha-na had grease on her hands, oil on her shirt, and a smile on her face. She was standing inside the engine room of the Baekdu, looking up at the thing she had helped bring to life, and she could not stop smiling. The engine was beautiful. She knew most people would not call a machine beautiful. Most people looked at engines and saw metal and wires and complicated parts that made no sense to them. But Ha-na did not see it that way. To her, every pipe and every wire and every glowing coil of energy was like a note in a song. And when they all worked together, when the whole thing hummed and pulsed with that deep, steady rhythm, it was the most beautiful song she had ever heard. She reached out and placed her hand flat against the outer casing of the main reactor. It was warm. Not hot, just warm, like the skin of something alive. She could feel the vibration moving through her palm and up her arm and into her chest. It felt like a heartbeat. Talking to the engine again? Ha-na turned around. Ji-won was standing behind her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He was one of her lead engineers, a quiet man with messy hair and dark circles under his eyes from too many late nights. But he was smiling too. Everyone on the team smiled when they were down here. You could not help it. I am not talking to it, Ha-na said. I am listening to it. Ji-won handed her a cup and stood beside her, looking up at the reactor. It sounds good today. It sounds perfect today. They stood there together for a moment, just listening. The hum of the engine filled the room like a warm blanket. Above them, the energy coils glowed a soft blue, the same blue that ran along the outside of the ship's hull. Ha-na had chosen that color herself. She had wanted the Baekdu to look alive, even from the outside. She wanted anyone who saw it to feel that this was not just a machine. It was something more. Ha-na had been building things for as long as she could remember. When she was 6 years old, she had taken apart her father's radio and put it back together again. It had worked better afterward. When she was 12, she had built a small robot out of scrap metal and old computer parts. It could walk across a room and pick up a cup. Her teachers had called her gifted. Her father had called her stubborn. Both were right. When Earth made first contact with the Galactic Council 8 years ago, Ha-na had been a young engineer working on satellite systems. She had watched the news like everyone else. She had seen the alien ships land. She had heard the council representatives explain, in polite and careful words, that humanity was welcome to join the galactic community, as long as they followed the rules. The rules were simple. Young species were given basic technology. They were allowed to build small ships for trade and transport. They were not allowed to build weapons above a certain class. They were not allowed to develop certain types of engines. They were expected to grow slowly, carefully, under the guidance of the older species. Ha-na had listened to all of this, and she had felt something hot and sharp in her chest. It was not anger exactly. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being told that there was a ceiling above her head, and she was not allowed to touch it. She did not like ceilings. Over the next few years, Hana worked her way up through the ranks of Earth's new space program. She studied every piece of alien technology that the Council shared with humanity. She took it apart in her mind, the same way she had taken apart her father's radio. She understood how it worked, and more importantly, she understood how it could work better. The idea for the Baekdu came to her late one night, alone in her lab, staring at a diagram of a standard Council propulsion system. The system was good. It was efficient. But it was also old. It had been designed thousands of years ago by the Varan, and every species since then had simply copied it with small changes. Nobody had ever tried to start from nothing and build something completely new. Hana had stared at that diagram for a long time. Then she had closed it, opened a blank screen, and started drawing. It took her 3 months to finish the first design. It took another 6 months to convince the Earth government to let her build it. They had been afraid. Building a ship like the Baekdu would break every rule the Council had set for humanity. It could start a war. It could get Earth destroyed. Hana had sat in a room full of generals and politicians and looked them all in the eye. If we follow their rules forever, she had said, we will be small forever. I did not become an engineer to be small. They had given her the project. Not because they were brave, but because they were curious. And maybe deep down, because they felt the same thing Hana felt, that hot, sharp feeling in the chest, that refusal to accept a ceiling. She had built her team carefully. 60 people. Engineers, physicists, programmers, welders. She had chosen each one personally. She had not looked for the smartest or the most experienced. She had looked for the ones with fire in their eyes. The ones who, when told something was impossible, leaned forward instead of stepping back. Jiwon had been one of the first she chose. He was quiet, but his mind moved like water, flowing around problems instead of crashing into them. He had designed the shield system in 2 weeks. When Hana tested it, the numbers had been so far beyond expectations that she had thought there was an error. There was no error. And now, 18 months after Hana had drawn her first line on that blank screen, the Baekdu was real. It hung in orbit around Earth's moon like a sleeping dragon. 3 kilometers of dark hull and glowing blue energy, carrying an engine that could fold space in ways the galaxy had never seen. Hana knew the Council had detected the ship. She knew they were afraid. She knew they were probably sitting in their great hall right now, arguing about what to do. She did not care about any of that. Politics was not her world. She did not build the Baekdu to frighten anyone. She built it because it was there to be built. Because the design existed in her mind, and leaving it there, unfinished, would have been like holding her breath forever. She took a sip of her coffee and looked up at the engine one more time. The blue coils pulsed. The hum filled the room. Jiwon, she said. Yes? Do you think they will come? The Council? Jiwon was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Yes, I think they will. Hana took another sip. Let them come. Let them see what we built. She was not afraid. She had never been afraid of people who looked at something new and did not understand it. She had spent her whole life surrounded by people like that. Teachers who said she was too young. Professors who said she was too ambitious. Council representatives who said humanity was too new. She had proved all of them wrong. And if the Council came to Earth with their fleet and their demands, she would prove them wrong too. Not with weapons, not with threats, but with the thing she had always believed in more than anything else. The simple, stubborn, unstoppable human need to build. The fleet arrived on a Thursday. Dooyeon was sitting in his captain's chair on the bridge of the Baekdu when the first ships dropped out of fold space. He watched them appear on the main screen, one after another, like stars blinking into existence. First 10, then 20, then 50. They kept coming. By the time the last ship arrived, there were over 200 Council warships, arranged in a wide arc around Earth's orbit, their hulls gleaming silver and gold against the black of space. It was, by any measure, an impressive display of power. The Council had sent ships from 6 different species. Viran battlecruisers, long and elegant, with energy weapons that could cut through a mountain. Fenari strike ships, small and fast, built to swarm and overwhelm. Drellin heavy destroyers, slow but armored so thick that almost nothing could scratch them. And dozens of others, each one representing centuries of engineering and warfare. Du-Yun looked at all of it and felt nothing. He was not a man who felt nothing in general. He loved his family. He loved his crew. He loved the feeling of sitting in this chair, on this bridge, inside this ship that should not exist. But fear was something he had left behind a long time ago. He had grown up poor in a small town where the winters were long and the food was never enough. He had joined the military at 18 because it was the only way out. He had worked his way up through hard years and harder choices. By the time the Council made first contact with Earth, Du-Yun was already a decorated officer with a reputation for staying calm when everything around him was on fire. When they had asked him to captain the Baekdu, he had said yes without hesitation. Not because he wanted glory, not because he wanted to be the man who stood against the galaxy. He said yes because he trusted the ship, and he trusted the woman who built it. Hana was down in the engine room right now. He knew that without checking. She was always in the engine room. She probably had her hand on the reactor casing, listening to it hum. The thought made him smile, just slightly, just enough that his first officer, Yunseo, noticed. "Something funny, Captain?" Yunseo asked from her station to his left. She was young, sharp, and had a habit of asking exactly the right question at exactly the wrong time. "Just thinking about our engineer," Du-Yun said. "She is going to be angry if they scratch her ship." "Nobody is going to scratch anything," Du-Yun said quietly. He meant it. The communication panel blinked, an incoming signal. Du-Yun nodded at Yunseo, and she opened the channel. Grand Admiral Subin's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exactly the way Du-Yun had imagined she would. Calm, controlled, and hiding something dangerous behind her eyes. She was sitting in a command chair aboard her flagship, with officers moving behind her in the background. Everything about the image was designed to project authority. "Captain Du-Yun," Subin said, "I am Grand Admiral Subin of the Galactic Council Combined Fleet. I am here under the authority of the full Council to deliver a formal demand." "I am listening, Grand Admiral," Du-Yun said. Subin did not blink. "The vessel you command, designated Baekdu, has been constructed in violation of Council Regulation 714, which limits the military shipbuilding capabilities of Class 7 civilizations. The Council demands that the vessel be powered down, opened for full inspection, and surrendered to Council custody pending review. You have 6 hours to comply." The bridge was silent. Every member of Du-Yun's crew was looking at him. He could feel their eyes, like small points of heat, on his skin. They were not afraid either. He had chosen them the same way Hana had chosen her engineers. Not for their skills, but for their fire. Du-Yun leaned back in his chair. He took a slow breath. Then he spoke. "Grand Admiral Subin, I have great respect for you, and for the Council, but I must decline your demand." The silence on the bridge deepened. On the screen, Subin's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. A tightening, a hardening. "Captain, I do not think you understand the situation," Subin said. "You are surrounded by 200 warships. Your vessel, however impressive, is alone. If you do not comply, we will be forced to act." Du-Yun nodded slowly. "I understand the situation perfectly, Grand Admiral. You have brought 200 ships to my home, and told me to give up the thing my people built with their own hands. And I am telling you, with all respect, that the answer is no. He paused, then added, but I do not want to fight, and I do not think you want one either. So let me show you something instead. Subin's eyes narrowed. Show me what? Du-yun looked over at Yunso. She was already watching him, her fingers hovering above her console. She knew what was coming. They had planned for this moment, not because they wanted war, but because they knew the council would come, and they knew that words alone would not be enough. Hana, Du-yun said, pressing the internal communication button. Are you ready? Hana's voice came through the speaker, calm and warm, like she was talking about the weather. The engine is singing, Captain. We are ready. Du-yun turned back to the screen. Grand Admiral, please watch your sensors carefully. What happens next will last approximately 6 seconds. I promise you, none of your ships will be harmed. Subin opened her mouth to respond, but Do-yun nodded at Yun-sao, and she pressed the button. The Baekdu moved. There was no warning, no engine roar, no flash of light. One moment the ship was there, hanging in Earth's orbit, surrounded by 200 warships. The next moment it was gone, simply gone, like it had never existed. Every sensor on every council ship screamed at the same time. Alarms filled bridges across the fleet. Officers shouted. Commanders gripped their armrests. On Subin's flagship, the tactical display went blank for a full second. Then it lit up again, with a single red dot on the far side of the galaxy. The Baekdu had jumped, not to the next planet, not to the next star system. It had crossed the entire galaxy in less than 3 seconds. Before anyone on the fleet could process what had just happened, the Baekdu jumped again, and 3 seconds later, it was back, right where it had started, right in front of Subin's flagship. The blue energy lines along its hull pulsed brightly, like the ship was laughing. 6 seconds, there and back. The fleet went completely silent. No alarms, no shouting, no movement. 200 warships, representing the combined military power of the Galactic Council, sat frozen in space, like statues. Do-yun waited a moment. Then he opened the communication channel again. Grand Admiral Subin, he said, his voice gentle, almost kind. The Baekdu is not a weapon. It is a message. We did not build it to destroy. We built it to show you what we are capable of. You can bring 200 ships, or 2,000, or 20,000. It does not matter. We are not your enemy, but we will not be kept small. He paused and let the words settle. Now, would you like to talk? Really talk? Because I think we have a lot to discuss. On the screen, Subin stared at him. For the first time since the conversation began, her mask cracked. Just slightly. Just enough for Do-yun to see something behind the authority and the control and the power. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was respect. Nobody moved for a long time. The 200 ships of the Council fleet hung in space like frozen birds. Their engines humming, their weapons powered, their crews staring at screens that still showed the impossible data from 6 seconds that had changed everything. The Baekdu sat at the center of it all, calm and dark and glowing blue, as if nothing had happened, as if crossing the entire galaxy and coming back in the time it takes to blink was the most natural thing in the world. On the bridge of her flagship, Grand Admiral Subin sat perfectly still. Her officers waited for orders. Her tactical team waited for commands. The entire fleet waited for her to speak. But Subin said nothing. She just sat there, looking at the image of the Baekdu on her main screen. And for the first time in her very long career, she did not know what to say. She had spent her whole life in the military. She had fought in 3 wars. She had commanded fleets that crushed rebellions and defended borders and kept the peace across 9 galactic arms. She had never lost a battle. She had never retreated. She had built her entire career on the belief that strength was the answer to every question. And now, in 6 seconds, a young species from a small blue planet had shown her that all the strength in the galaxy was not enough. She pressed a button on her armrest. A private channel opened to the Baekdu. "Captain Do-yun," she said. Her voice was quiet. Not defeated, not angry, just quiet. The way a person sounds when they are thinking very carefully about every word. "Yes, Grand Admiral," Do-yun answered. "That jump, across the full galaxy and back. Your ship experienced no damage? No stress to the hull? No energy loss?" "None," Do-yun said. "The Baekdu performed exactly as designed." Subin closed her eyes for a moment. Exactly as designed. The humans had not just stumbled onto something by accident. They had planned it. They had built it on purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing. "I am going to ask you something," Subin said, "and I need the truth." "I have not lied to you yet, Grand Admiral." "No, you have not." She paused. "Could you have destroyed my fleet? During that jump, before we even knew you were gone, could you have positioned your ship behind us and fired?" The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then Do-yun answered, "Yes." Another silence. Longer this time. "But you did not," Subin said. "No, we did not, and we never will, unless someone forces us to." Subin opened her eyes. She looked at the Baekdu on her screen. She looked at the data her sensors had recorded. She looked at the 200 ships under her command, ships that she now understood could be turned to dust before their crews even knew what was happening. And she made a decision. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. Every ship, every crew member, every officer. "This is Grand Admiral Subin. All ships stand down. Power down weapons. Return to formation holding pattern. We are not engaging." The response was immediate. Across the fleet, weapon systems went dark. Shield generators dropped to minimum. The tension that had been building for hours began to drain away, slowly, like water seeping into dry ground. Then Subin opened a channel to the council station. The face of the Viran elder appeared on screen, his thin features tight with worry. "Grand Admiral, what is happening? Our sensors detected an impossible energy event. Is the fleet under attack?" "No," Subin said. "The fleet is standing down." "Standing down on whose authority?" "Mine. I am the commanding officer of this fleet, and I am telling you that any military action against the humans would be a mistake. Not a small mistake. The kind of mistake that ends civilizations." The Viran elders stared at her. "Explain." "Their ship crossed the galaxy in 3 seconds, there and back in 6. They could have destroyed us at any point during that demonstration, and we would not have been able to fire a single shot in response. Our fleet is not a threat to them. It is not even an inconvenience." The elder's face went pale, even paler than usual, which for a Viran was saying something. "That is not possible," he whispered. "I watched it happen," Subin said. "It is very possible. And now we need to decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. One where we try to fight the humans and lose everything, or one where we accept that something has changed, and we change with it." Then he nodded, slowly, like a man accepting something he had been dreading for years. Subin closed the channel, and turned back to the image of the Baekdu. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She opened a direct channel to the human ship. "Captain Do-yun, Grand Admiral. You said you wanted to talk. Really talk." "I did." "Then I would like to come aboard your ship. Alone. No guards, no weapons, just me." There was a pause. Then Do-yun's voice came back, and there was warmth in it. Real warmth. "You are welcome aboard the Baekdu, Grand Admiral. I will have someone meet you at the docking port." 20 minutes later, Subin's shuttle landed inside the Baekdu. The docking bay was enormous, big enough to hold a dozen council frigates. The walls were dark metal, with those same blue energy lines running through them like veins. It was beautiful and strange, and completely unlike anything the council had ever built. Du-Yun was waiting for her at the bottom of the ramp. He was younger than she had expected. Average height, calm eyes. He stood with his hands at his sides, relaxed, like he was greeting a friend and not the commander of a fleet that had come to take his ship. Beside him stood a woman in an engineer's uniform. She had grease on her hands and oil on her shirt, and the brightest eyes Subin had ever seen. This had to be Hana, the one who built the ship. "Grand Admiral," Du-Yun said with a small bow. "Welcome aboard." Subin looked at him. Then she looked at Hana. Then she looked around the docking bay, at the dark walls and the blue light, and the quiet hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She could feel it in her chest, like a heartbeat. "Your engineer," Subin said, nodding toward Hana. "She designed all of this. Every line of it," Du-Yun said. Subin turned to Hana. "How?" she asked. It was not a demand. It was not an accusation. It was a real question, from one person who had spent her life pushing limits to another. Hana smiled. It was a simple smile, the kind a child gives when they show you something they made and they are proud of it. "I just kept building," Hana said. "That is all. I saw what was possible, and I kept building until I got there." Subin stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Grand Admiral Subin laughed. It was a short laugh, quiet and rough, like something that had been locked away for years and had finally found its way out. "You kept building," Subin repeated. She shook her head slowly. "The entire galaxy is afraid of you, and your answer is that you kept building." "The galaxy does not need to be afraid," Hana said. "We are not here to take anything from anyone. We just want to build." Subin looked at Du-Yun. He nodded. She looked at Hana again. The engineer's eyes were still bright, still burning with that fire that no fleet and no regulation and no amount of fear could ever put out. And Subin understood. Finally, completely, she understood. The humans were not a threat. They were not a mistake. They were not a problem to be solved, or a danger to be contained. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that did not build because they had to, but because they could not stop. Because building was in their blood and their bones and their very souls, and no power in the universe could take that away from them. She turned back to Du-Yun. "Captain, I believe you said we have a lot to discuss." "I believe I did." "Then let us begin." And there, inside a ship that should not have existed, built by a species that should not have been able to build it, the galaxy changed. Not with a war, not with a weapon, not with a single shot fired. It changed with a conversation, a laugh, and a simple truth that had been true since the first human picked up a rock and shaped it into something new. Humans build. It is what they do. And the galaxy, after millions of years of thinking it had seen everything, was finally learning that some things cannot be predicted, some things cannot be controlled, and some things are more powerful than any fleet ever assembled. The new era had begun.